Let's get right into it. Number 6. The spinning of the Salem witch trials. When you think of the Salem witch trials, what do you picture? A grim, puritanical mob burning innocent women at the stake, right? We've all seen the movies, but what if I told you that iconic image of flames and screaming is completely wrong? The truth is, no one was burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials. Not a single person. While 20 people were indeed executed, 19 were hanged on what's now called Gallows Hill, and one man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones. The burning at the stake part? That was actually a common punishment for witchcraft in Europe, but not in colonial America. The fact that we so often confuse the two is a powerful testament to how popular culture can rewrite history, blending distant facts into a single, dramatic, but ultimately false narrative. The aha is realizing our mental picture of this dark moment in American history is more Hollywood than historical. It's like hearing a story about your friend's wild party. You hear they had a giant bonfire and a food fight. Then you go to tell someone else, and the story becomes, "My friend burned down their house during a food fight." The details get mixed and exaggerated until the simple truth is lost in a more sensational, but completely fake, story. The Salem witch trials are a historical bonfire that got turned into a house fire. This discovery isn't about downplaying the horrific injustice of the trials. It's about understanding the specific, brutal methods used. Knowing the truth, the hangings and the pressing, makes the story no less tragic, but it adds a layer of precise, uncomfortable reality. It teaches us to question the dramatic portrayals we see and to dig into the details, because sometimes the true story is more chilling than the one we're told. Number 5. The Blackout of the Middle Ages. You've probably heard of the Dark Ages, a historical deep freeze where civilization collapsed after the Roman Empire, and everyone was an illiterate peasant living in mud huts, right? 1,000 years of intellectual darkness? Well, buckle up, because your teacher told you a story that's mostly fiction. The term Dark Ages was actually coined by an Italian scholar, Francesco Petrarch, in the 1330s. He used it to describe what he saw as a decline in classical Latin literature after the fall of Rome. But the reality is far from dark. This period saw the flourishing of Islamic Golden Age in science and mathematics, significant advancements in agriculture and technology in China, and even in Europe, the establishment of the first universities, the creation of Gothic architecture, and the proliferation of illuminated manuscripts. Sure, there were periods of turmoil, but to paint a 1,000-year stretch of history as a total intellectual blackout is a massive oversimplification that completely ignores a global intellectual boom. Calling the entire Middle Ages the Dark Ages is like looking at a single rainy afternoon and calling the entire year a rainy year. You're completely ignoring the sunny days, the warm nights, the beautiful spring blossoms, and the harvest bounty. A whole lot was happening, and most of it was far from dark. The reevaluation of the Dark Ages teaches us that history is not a simple linear progression. It's a complex, global tapestry with different threads of progress happening at different times and places. Dismissing an entire era is a lazy way to tell a story, and a modern historian's job is to pull back the curtain and show us the vibrant, sometimes messy, but undeniably brilliant reality behind the historical stereotypes. Number 4. The myth of George Washington's wooden teeth. The father of our country, George Washington, had wooden teeth. It's a fact you've heard since grade school. It's part of his legend. You can practically see him wincing as he chews on a splintery piece of oak. It's a great story, but it's completely false. Here's the aha moment that will forever change how you picture our first president. George Washington's famous dentures were not made of wood. They were a marvel of 18th century dentistry, crafted from a combination of gold, ivory, from hippopotamus and elephant, lead, and human and animal teeth. The misconception likely arose from the dentures' stained appearance, which made them look like grained wood. He suffered from dental problems his entire life, and his extensive collection of replacement teeth shows just how dedicated he was to finding a solution. It's a fascinating look into a very human problem for a historical icon. It's like seeing a beautifully painted, weathered antique and assuming the whole thing is made of old barnwood. You're just looking at the surface, not the complex, intricate materials that actually make it up. Washington's dentures were the weathered antique, and our common knowledge is the quick, incorrect judgment. This factoid, though small, reveals something important about how we create and perpetuate national myths. We latch onto simple, relatable stories, even if they're wrong. Learning the truth, that his teeth were a testament to the era's medical ingenuity and his own lifelong struggle with pain, replaces a simple, false story with a more complex and ultimately more human portrait of a historical figure. Number 3. The peaceful Pilgrims and Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, a beautiful story of two groups, the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag tribe, coming together for a feast of friendship. It's a foundational American tale. But what if the iconic meal we celebrate was not a symbol of peace, but a brief, pragmatic truce before an era of brutal conflict and displacement? The traditional narrative of a joyful, shared meal is a massive simplification. For the Wampanoag, the feast was less a celebration and more a diplomatic gathering, a temporary alliance of convenience. They came to the 1621 Harvest Festival not because they were invited, but because they heard the Pilgrims firing their muskets, and thinking it was an attack, came to investigate. Over the following decades, the relationship soured dramatically, leading to King Philip's War in 1675, a devastating conflict that resulted in immense loss of life and the near-total destruction of the Wampanoag people and their way of life. The aha is realizing the first Thanksgiving wasn't the start of a beautiful friendship, but a tiny, fleeting moment of cooperation at the beginning of a long and tragic story. It's like seeing two rival football teams shake hands before a game. Sure, it looks friendly, but you know that in a few minutes they're going to be fighting for every inch of the field. The handshake is a brief moment of formality, not a lasting bond of camaraderie. The first Thanksgiving was history's greatest pre-game handshake. This historical reframing isn't about making us feel bad about Thanksgiving. It's about pushing us to understand the full complexity of our history. It teaches us that moments of apparent peace can be fragile, and that foundational myths often gloss over the difficult truths of colonization and conflict. The real story is a far more nuanced and important lesson in intercultural relations and the tragic consequences of misunderstanding. Number 2. The simple fall of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire fell in 476 AD. That's the textbook date, right? It was a cataclysmic overnight event where barbarians sacked Rome and everything collapsed. Except that's not what happened at all. Historians have known for a long time that the fall of Rome was a long, slow process, not a sudden collapse. The fall in 476 AD refers only to the deposition of the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus. But the eastern half of the empire, centered in Constantinople, continued to thrive for another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. In the West, things weren't just over. Roman laws and culture persisted, and many of the so-called barbarian tribes were actually former Roman allies who had slowly integrated into the empire's power structure. The fall was less a collapse and more a long, messy, and gradual transformation over centuries. It's like watching a huge corporation slowly splinter into smaller, regional companies over decades. Saying the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD is like saying a person died when they retired from their job. Their old role might be over, but their life continues, albeit in a different form. The empire didn't disappear overnight. It just changed its name and its leadership, and a lot of the same people kept doing the same jobs in different ways. The myth of a sudden collapse is a tidy way to teach a complex history. The reality, a long, drawn-out process of political, economic, and cultural change, is a much more valuable lesson. It teaches us that major historical shifts are rarely a single moment in time, but are rather the culmination of 1,000 small events, and that nothing, not even a powerful empire, simply vanishes. It evolves. Number 1. The lone inventor of the light bulb. Thomas Edison, the lone genius in his lab, who, through sheer grit and a stroke of brilliance, invented the light bulb. It's a story that epitomizes American ingenuity, but it's also a story that completely ignores the dozens of other brilliant minds who contributed to the technology. The incandescent light bulb was not invented by Thomas Edison. It was perfected and commercialized by him. Before Edison, over 24 other inventors had created working incandescent lamps. People like Joseph Swan in England, who received a patent for a working light bulb nearly a decade before Edison's famous one. Edison's genius was not in the initial invention, but in the systems thinking that made it a practical reality. He created a long-lasting filament, and perhaps more importantly, he developed the entire electrical utility grid to power it. He didn't just make a light bulb, he built the world that could use it. The aha is realizing the story we were told is a convenient myth, one that turns a complex collaborative process of innovation into a simple, heroic tale of one man. It's like saying Steve Jobs invented the computer. He didn't. He didn't invent the mouse, the graphical user interface, or the operating system. But what he did do was brilliantly package and market all of those existing technologies into a beautiful, user-friendly product that changed the world. Edison was the Steve Jobs of the light bulb, a brilliant innovator and marketer, not the lone inventor. This discovery isn't about diminishing Edison's legacy. It's about enriching our understanding of innovation itself. It teaches us that progress is rarely the work of a single mind working in isolation. More often, it is a cumulative process, a relay race, where one genius builds on the work of another. Recognizing this truth gives us a more accurate and more inspiring view of human ingenuity as a collective, collaborative effort. That's all for today. Subscribe to see more.